Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a massive, rapidly escalating challenge in Nepal, and more importantly, the specific policy designed to actually fix it. We are talking about electronic waste, or e-waste, and a really powerful regulatory framework called Extended Producer Responsibility. If you've ever wondered how a country can completely transform a hazardous waste nightmare into a regulated, green economy, well, you are definitely in the right place.
Let's kick things off with a number that sets the scale of what we're dealing with today. 42,000. According to the Global E-Waste Monitor 2024, Nepal generated an estimated 42,000 tons of e-waste in the year 2023 alone. To put that into perspective, that is a literal mountain of discarded electronics. And the crazy part is, it's growing at an annual rate of 18%. As Nepal really scales up its use of electrical equipment, including a huge national push toward e-cooking devices, this mountain is only getting steeper.
So this begs the immediate question, right? Where does it all go? When your induction stove, your old mobile phone, or your laptop finally gives out in Nepal, what's its final destination? It is a question of massive environmental and public health importance, and currently, the answer is pretty concerning.
To ground this abstract concept for a second, just consider a typical dismantled e-cooking device, with all its internal copper coils, circuit boards, and wiring exposed. What you really need to know is that right now, more than 95% of e-waste in Nepal is processed by the informal sector. That means devices exactly like this one are often broken apart by hand using totally unsafe, environmentally damaging methods. The workers doing this are frequently exposed to highly toxic stuff like lead, mercury, and cadmium, simply because the formal infrastructure just doesn't exist yet to handle it safely.
Here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We're going to hit Nepal's hidden crisis, shifting the burden, the polluter pays, formalizing a broken system, the roadmap to implementation, and finally, building a circular economy.
Let's jump right into Section 1, Nepal's hidden e-waste crisis and the unregulated threat it poses today.
You know, there's a stark contrast in how this waste is handled today. While Nepal actually does have foundational environmental laws, like the Environment Protection Act and the Solid Waste Management Act, there's a glaring gap. The country lacks a comprehensive, dedicated policy specifically for e-waste. Because of that missing piece, the immense burden of managing these highly toxic, complex electronics falls entirely onto overwhelmed local municipalities. And the result? That massive 95% blue chunk you see represents the informal, unregulated sector stepping in to fill the void. Only a tiny 5% goes to formal or alternative disposal.
So, Sections 2 and 3, shifting the burden and the polluters pays principle. How do we actually fix this logistical nightmare?
This introduces us to the core policy framework of our entire discussion, Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR. It's exactly what it sounds like. EPR is a policy approach that fundamentally shifts the end-of-life management of a product, whether it's an induction stove or a smartphone, away from those struggling local municipalities and places it squarely on the shoulders of the producers. It ensures accountability across the entire life cycle of the device.
And here is the real game changer, how it works financially. Through the EPR framework, the financial responsibility falls to producers, importers, and brand owners based directly on the volume of devices they actually put into the Nepali market. They usually do this through mechanisms like eco-fees. Essentially, the companies profiting from the sale of the electronics must fund the system required to safely collect and recycle those exact same electronics when they inevitably break. It's a true polluter pays model. Moving on to Section 4, formalizing a broken system, taking things from toxic to regulated. An EPR framework aims to create a literal night and day difference on the ground for Nepal. We are moving from a current state characterized by hazardous methods and local authority burden to a future state that actually stimulates the development of a formal recycling sector. And this isn't just about cleaning up trash, it's a massive economic driver. It directly incentivizes green employment, ensures safe handling practices, and guarantees producer accountability. It takes a huge environmental liability and flips it into a regulated, job-creating industry. Of course, for a giant, complex system like this to work, everyone has to know their job. Under this proposed framework, a national EPR committee would be set up to oversee this whole matrix of roles. You've got producers paying eco-fees, the government regulating and monitoring compliance, recyclers formalizing their operations to handle the hazardous stuff safely, and, importantly, consumers, us. We have a role too. Responsible disposal.
Things like discount programs for returning old devices are absolutely vital to making sure that e-waste actually enters this formal chain in the first place.
Section 5. The roadmap to implementation. Because a policy on paper is great, but how do we make it real?
Let's look at how this builds progressively, because you really can't just flip a switch overnight. Actually, looking at India's first EPR rollout in 2011, trying to do it without proper infrastructure led to some immense challenges. So Nepal's framework proposes a smart, phased approach. Phase 1 is all about voluntary participation and capability building, getting everyone aligned. Phase 2 is fascinating. It's a pilot implementation using project-based devices. For example, testing the waters by applying EPR specifically to e-cooking devices distributed by the government. It's a controlled testing ground. And then finally, Phase 3 rolls out mandatory, device-based EPR across the entire broader market.
To support those phases, you need some very specific tools deployed on the ground. A robust IT infrastructure is absolutely crucial. You have to be able to track the flow of e-waste from the collection bin all the way to the recycling plant. You also need financial tools like deposit refund systems, giving consumers direct cash incentives to return old devices. But equally important are skill development initiatives. You have to train the currently informal workforce in safe, formal practices and run massive public awareness campaigns so everyday citizens understand why they literally can't throw their electronics in the regular trash anymore.
And that brings us to Section 6, building a circular economy. Because this goes way beyond just disposal.
The ultimate end game of EPR is moving Nepal away from that outdated, linear, take, make, dispose model and stepping into a circular economy. We're talking about fostering a closed-loop system. Think about it. When producers are suddenly on the hook financially for the end of life of their products, it naturally incentivizes them to design devices that last longer, are easier to repair, and use fewer toxic materials in the first place. The framework heavily supports local repair centers and recovering valuable resources like copper and steel, feeding them right back into the local economy.
As highlighted in the research for this policy framework, the sentiment is pretty clear. Together, we can pave the way for a cleaner and greener future. Developing an effective EPR system in Nepal is a highly collaborative effort. It requires the private sector, municipalities, the national government, and everyday citizens to recognize that e-waste isn't just someone else's problem. It's a shared responsibility. And if managed correctly, it offers some truly massive environmental and economic benefits.
So, I'm going to leave you with a question to reflect on. Just take a quick look around at the electronics surrounding you right now. Where will the devices in your own home end up when they finally die? As nations like Nepal step up to design these accountable, closed-loop systems, it's a powerful reminder of our own electronic footprints and the urgent global need for frameworks that ensure the conveniences of today don't become the toxic burdens of tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.